All right, everyone. Welcome to Deep Dives with Dogs. Well, today's topic is going to kind of be about a grander topic of the power of the church and how that power has changed throughout European history and really world history in general. But and when I'm talking about the church, I mean specifically the Catholic Church. And a lot of this will be talking about kind of like the power of the Pope and how it changes. So, I guess we'll get into it. The Pope is a position kind of set up in the early times of Christianity. The first Pope, I believe, is Paul. It's either Paul or Peter. I don't remember exactly. Someone will have to correct me. But it starts with a P. But he teaches the gospel and all this. And doesn't have really the best end. Not a lot of the early Christian leaders do, but Rome was a little none too happy with it. But as time goes on, eventually you get more to the idea of the Pope that we have today, of he's like the right hand, more or less, to God. Like he is God's speaker on this earth, all that kind of stuff. And with that comes a lot of power. Now, inherently it does, because he's the leader of the religion, that kind of stuff. Leader of Catholic Christianity, which a lot of Europe was for quite a while. But there's more to it than that as well. In that, while he does have this power, a lot of popes kind of just get installed by certain people, especially early on, because it's like, oh, well, it was just someone. And not a lot of people really wanted the position. The Pope and its position would dramatically change very quickly because of one Charles the Great, King Charlemagne. Charlemagne wants to legitimize himself as the Roman Empire. He wants to legitimize his empire in the eyes of all those before. And so one way to do that is to have the authority given into him by the Pope. So Charlemagne, in his grand coronation, has the Pope crown him. And that's how he becomes, the king or the emperor of Rome, technically. The Roman emperor, that's the Holy Roman Empire eventually, but not quite yet. But King Charles gives himself all this power through the Pope. However, in a way, it also gives the Pope immense power. And it was kind of like a deal, really, that Charlemagne kind of worked out with the Pope himself. And it was that, hey, if you crown me king, one, he would give him protection, which the Pope kind of needed. He was in a little bit of a weakened state like early on. He had a lot of power, but also not at the same time, if you know what I mean. Not necessarily physical power, but religious power. But with the protection of Charles the Great, he has a lot of physical protection as well, physical power. And the Pope being the one to crown the emperor, the one in all this, it then gives him power over those emperors. He is the one that crowned them, oh, well, it's a divine right to rule, but I am the speaker of God. Through me, I can tell you what God says. Basically, that's what they're kind of saying. Is that how the Pope sees himself today? Not necessarily. They do think of themselves as the speaker of God, but not in the same way that they thought of themselves, back then, let's just say. However, this gives the Pope quite a bit of power. And that lasts for quite a while. The Pope is kind of more complicated than that, but the Pope does have immense power. They have the power to communicate, and if you excommunicate somebody, that's kind of like death, just realistically. But you also have things like the Pope getting much more physical power, the papal state rising and becoming, honestly, a decently powerful nation. Not necessarily the largest, but pretty powerful. And it really existed kind of all the way up to the Italians rising up and making their kingship in like the 1800s. papal state really kind of existed until about then. But all this is to say, the Pope had immense power over kings and could kind of do whatever he wanted in a lot of their lands. You know, if the Pope showed up, he had more power than the king in many ways. Some of that gets changed, though, with the passing of a law, or I guess a ruling, by King Charles VII of France in 1438. King Charles VII, definitely not Charlemagne, but is a Charles. And he passes the pragmatic, I think it's called the pragmatic, that doesn't really matter. Doesn't really matter what it's called. But it's a pragmatic thing on my bougies. I can't remember the word, though. But either way, this limits the power of the Pope to less power than the king in his territories, of course, which at the time, you can probably understand why Charles did this. If the Pope has more power than him, then why is he, then, oh, well, the Pope could do anything, blah, 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 and it undermines his power as king. But this will lead to a chain reaction of the Pope eventually losing a lot of power. I mean, think of it. I said 1438. That's not that long from this time to Protestants rising up quite en masse, and kind of doing a bunch of other things. And it's only about 600 years till modern times, really, where the Pope doesn't really have any power, unlike in the past. It's these small things that we always have to think about that, like, at the time, they probably weren't thinking like, oh, well, that's, I'm going to undermine the entire papacy, No. And even in Charles's time, it wouldn't have been seen necessarily as a wholesale undermining of the papacy by most people. Now, by people in power, kind of would have been. And it would have also given them the green light to say, hey, if France can do it, France, the largest, for a long time, the largest, most powerful nation in Europe, if they can do it, hey, that opens the door for the rest of us to do it. Just saying. It's really kind of crazy to think. The Pope had, at one point, unimaginable power. Probably more power than any other human in history, in some ways. But kings want their power a little bit more, But that's going to do it for this video. If you guys like the video, leave a like. If everybody's going to improve on these videos, leave a comment down below. I just appreciate your feedback. And as always, subscribe. It really does help out the channel. Thank you.